And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Report. I'm LA Batchelor. We thank you for joining us. As always, whether you're watching on StreamYard or YouTube, Facebook at Pad Nation, we welcome you wherever you're watching this broadcast. And please do subscribe to all of which I'll get to at the end of the broadcast. Want to bring in my guests. Always good to have them on from Anastas Media, covering New England sports and beyond like no other. He's Nick Anastas. And Nick, I hope all is well with you, sir.
LA, how are you?
Good, good, good. Not as good as, not as bad as how Chief fans are feeling right now. Whether you picked them because you for gambling purposes, or if you picked them because you thought and you wanted them to win. I got to be honest, Nick. After the first couple of touchdowns for Philly, I turned the game off. I started watching something else. They look so dominant, and people were saying, but and I'm one of them. Number 15, get it done. You and I were talking about that, but Philly has the blueprint, not just to beat the Chiefs, but to win a lot of games because, and it's basic fundamental football, Nick. You got to be dominant on your offense and your defensive line. You can band-aid some other stuff around, but if you strong up front on both sides, you can do some damage. You could play action, as you saw what Hurts was doing, and it helps to have Saquon Barkley out there. But this whole notion of the passing game is it's almost like they said in baseball, chicks like the long ball. Well, they got the passing game. Nick Sirianni and the Eagles said, we're going to run it down your throat and then pass, rather than pass to set up the run. And that's the blueprint of course, with, like I said, being strong up front and on defense, offense and defensive lines.
Yeah, I picked the Eagles to win, but as soon as that game started, I was like beating myself up for not taking them bigger. It seemed like I should have seen it coming. We talked about the historical situation the Chiefs were in. Nobody's been able to win 3 in a row for a reason, because it's nearly impossible to do. The league is just too good. Say what you want about the NFL, and it certainly has valid criticisms. We've been over it, but they're, I think, the best of the 4 leagues in terms of creating parity year in and year out. In terms of creating, even a team like Washington, who was down on their luck for a long time, last year included 4 total wins. They go from 4 wins to 12 in 1 year, and they're a game away from the Super Bowl. That's in 1 year. Now, again, part of that is because the NFL has allowed, for better or worse, the roster situations to be what they are, which means a lot of player movement year in and year out. So you get a high rate of turnover, you get teams that can rebuild quickly, and you get a more competitive league top to bottom, which means that it's very hard to be the last team standing out of 32 every single year. And we saw that come to fruition with Kansas City coming up short. Now, Philly, you're right. Historically, how do you win football games? It's up front. It's in the trench. It's along the O-line. It's along the D-line. And Philly, I think the argument's over now, probably had both the best O-line and perhaps the best D-line all season. So this team was I think ready to go. I mean, they were on a mission. They got the right guy with the right temperament under center. We talked about that last week. That proved to be true. He's never rattled. And now he's got a seat at the table with the all-time greats with the Super Bowl win. So Jalen Hurts, and by the way, fully healthy this year, as opposed to about 80% all of last year. His mobility was obviously improved now that he's had time to heal. He's a better mobile quarterback than he was in 2023. Did he extend drives himself with his legs? I think he did. I don't think he gets enough credit for being as mobile as he is. But he's more dynamic than he gets credit for. And again, that O-line was moving people up front. The D-line didn't need the blitz, as the broadcasters made apparent. And in the end, we're seeing everything kind of come back full cycle. Running the football and, getting it done up front, simplifying the playbook, taking some of that pressure off a quarterback's shoulders seems to be in vogue again. It seems like, we didn't see the quarterbacks go bananas through the air. Nobody threw 50,000 yards. Nobody threw for 50 touchdowns. So I think we're kind of exiting that high-flying era and coming back towards a more balanced approach to football, which is the way the game really has been meant to be played the whole time.
Yeah.
I think the NFL's taking notice of that, and the trends are shifting a bit.
Yeah, and I think Philly ownership and Jeffrey Lurie, who he put in the GM, has just done a phenomenal job. That it starts with that too, making the right picks, the draft picks. They had so many rookie and so many first player guys, especially on defense, first player to their team on defense, that it just was magic. It worked. And I have to say, again, people ask me who you rooting for. I'm a Steelers fan, and if you give me, if you put a gun in my head, I'll give you a pick. But for me, it was a win-win for me, because I would have liked to see Kansas City do something that no other team had done. But I also wanted Jalen to do well, because all the naysayers, all the people outside of you and I who, like you said, is cool, is calm. He could throw the ball. He can do anything he wants to do on the field. And he had the injuries, and then he left, went to Oklahoma and that whole thing. And Tua took over, all the stuff around him, even before he got in the NFL, and then now. So I'm happy for him. And by the way, just the fourth African-American quarterbacks to win the Super Bowl. Doug Williams, Pat Mahomes, him, and of course, excuse me. Oh God, I forgot the fourth one already. Shame on me.
But I'm trying to help you out.
Doug Williams, Hurts.
Yeah, it was Williams for a long time as the only, and then obviously Mahomes came on the scene.
Right. How could I forget Russell Wilson?
And Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Almost won it twice.
Right.
Yeah.
But
no.
I just think it's good. Kudos to him and all he's been through.
Yeah, and I said this last week. I think this offseason we're going to find out more about him personality. This should. I mean, the NFL should run some puff pieces. He should pick up some advertisements and some endorsements. And we should get to know him, because he doesn't offer you much. I mean, he's not out in the spotlight. His answers in interviews seem to be pretty calculated and concise. He seems like kind of a private guy off the field, but I think we'll know a little bit more about him because the spotlight is going to shine on him throughout this offseason. And you're right, he deserves it. He's done nothing but say the right thing, do the right thing, and play well in the big moments.
Talking with Nick Anastas from Anastas Media here on the Batchelor News Report on the Batchelor News Network. Nick, let's talk about the team that lost, and they got beat. Like I said, I didn't even know it was 24-0 at halftime or whatever it was, because after I saw how Philly were tossing them around. I knew they were in for it. But what about this team moving forward? Kelsey hasn't announced if he's going to stay or go, and they got to rebuild. Certainly, Pat Mahomes' Achilles heel, or his kryptonite, is that backside. They have to shore up that side where he was just getting clobbered. I mean, both sides, but that backside, they really need to make sure. But what do you see about this team, and can you see them back in the Super Bowl?
I think you already identified their main problems on the roster. The right tackle, Taylor, did not have a good day, to say the least. So I think probably if they weren't looking at that right tackle position to begin with, I think they certainly are now. Obviously they're not far away. I mean, nobody needs to panic. I think Kelsey is probably done, but he started getting phased out of the offense really from week one on. I mean,
Right.
he had a handful of games where he was above 70 yards, but really that was it. Long gone are the days where he'd be in the slot. So they're going to get Rashee Rice back, which I think is a major upgrade. He is underrated, young, still with plenty left to give. He should rebound 100% and make a difference in that slot for them offensively in the pass game specifically. But they need some other things as well. Probably another edge rusher. I mean, Karlaftis is pretty good, but they had options outside of Chris Jones on some of those other Super Bowl winning teams, including
Right.
Frank Clark, who they never quite replaced.
Right.
So I think an edge guy defensively is probably their top priority on that side of the ball. And as you said, right tackle. At some point, they probably bring in another running back. Pacheco, he just didn't look like himself coming back from that injury. And sometimes those lower leg injuries can zap the bounce or the spring or the juice or whatever you want to call it in a running back. And unfortunately, I think that's happened to Pacheco.
Yeah.
So I think, and especially with this draft class, which is arguably the deepest running back rookie draft we've seen since 2017, they probably in the third or fourth round grab another back as well. So there's some obvious, I think, needs for Andy Reid and company to address, but I think they will for sure starting in April.
Nick, I want to just mention. I don't know how he does it. It's almost like the Kevin Bacon game where Kevin Bacon's attached to everybody, but Aaron Rodgers, and the fact that it not coming back to the Jets, I'm pretty sure. So what does that do for Devontae Adams? And when you look at Devontae Adams, you probably got half the teams in the league that want him. But what do you think happens with Aaron? I know Steeler fans and Steeler players have said he need to go sit his old behind down somewhere. We don't need him. But is it a market for him? And if he splits, where do you think Devontae Adams will go?
I think Rodgers probably does retire. Just based on what he said in the media about, he's good either way, basically. I think he's probably done. He's got nothing left to prove. And he's got, I think, a lucrative post-football career ahead of him no matter what he does.
Yeah.
So I think he's done. Adams, I would cut bait. I just would. I'm not exactly sure what that contract situation looks like. But if they owe him, a ton of money, I think he's probably an early roster cut. It seems like this regime wants to start fresh. And Adams is no spring chicken either. I mean, he's still good. I get it. But he's 30, 31, 32, whatever it's going to be. Probably overpaid. I think the Jets are best to take the savings and use it elsewhere on the roster is what I would think. I think Adam probably ends up with a 1-year deal with the highest bidder, probably a contender. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with T. Higgins. He may be really the first domino to fall at the position in terms of free agency. So if T. Higgins leaves, maybe a spot opens up for Adams with Cincinnati, something like that. But I think his days with the Jets are done.
See, and just having said that, let's switch over to the Patriots, where some of the reports I read said that they're interested in not only Devontae Adams, but in Cooper Kupp. And now he's had injuries, and I think he's owed a ton of money. So what have you heard, or what do you think the Patriots are going to do? Because if this kid's going to be your quarterback, he needs somebody to throw the ball to.
Right, but neither of those guys are long-term answers.
Right.
So I would say no to both of them. Kupp is even more closer to retirement than Adams. Both of those, somebody's going to overpay both of them. And, we'll see what the Patriots do, but I would not be in that camp. It may be a 1-year Band-Aid, but, that's not a long-term solution. I think it probably lies in the draft. Not necessarily the fourth overall pick. I would use that up front to protect May. And then in the second, add a receiver is what I would do. But who knows? I mean, it's anybody's guess at this point. They really haven't tipped their hand either way. But we've seen this go badly for other teams. I mean, the NFL by and large is a young league. So, if you're a player away and you feel like you need to bring in a veteran to take that next step to the Super Bowl, that's one thing. That's not the situation that the Patriots are in. They're in a full-blown rebuild.
Right.
And to bring in 30-year-old receivers is not part of that blueprint.
Yeah, that's a good point. And looking at Buffalo, I mean, where do you go? I know how you feel about Josh Allen. I'm giving Josh Allen his props this year, but again, I differ with you with this coach. He's made enough mistakes. See, Josh Allen can't get blamed for everything. You can't coach the way he coaches in some of these games, in particular on the road against Kansas City. So I think if they don't make it to a Super Bowl next year, I think a Super Bowl bust for him.
Well, the pressure is certainly on. I'll agree with you there. I think the longer the Bills are kind of stuck in this stage of development, the hotter the seat underneath Sean McDermott gets. I will agree with you there. But, again, not to rehash the whole debate, he is the guy responsible for rebuilding the franchise. So he has to get a little bit of leeway because of that. But we'll see. I mean, the Billy Beane has done nothing but sport a contender year in and year out since he's been the GM. They've drafted well, they've signed well, they've developed well. So there's nothing really to dissuade fans from expecting another good draft that can produce right away. Now, like Kansas City, they're close. An upgrade here, an upgrade there on each side of the ball, and they're basically there. But yeah, you got to give at least McDermott one more year to see if he can get over the hump. Now it seems like the Chiefs are wounded. A week ago it seemed like they were invincible. Now it looks like they're vulnerable again, and that gives hope, I think, to the rest of the AFC, the rest of the league, and certainly the Bills.
The only other division I want to talk about is my AFC North. And look, starting with my Steelers, I don't want Russell Wilson. I didn't want him. I don't know why they got him in the first place. I like the Justin Field thing because of the upside of the potential. He showed he had 1,700 head coaches and 23,000 offensive coordinators when he was in Chicago. He was 4-2 with the Steelers. He was making some mistakes, but not really turning the ball over a lot. Maybe poor decisions sometimes, taking checkdowns instead of throwing it down incomplete and stuff like that. So I would keep him and then draft another quarterback. What do you think Pittsburgh should do?
I think that's about right. I mean, I was with you. I thought Fields deserved to stay in the lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, he was winning games. He wasn't turning it over. That's what you want from your quarterback. I'll take those two things: a win and a win in the turnover battle from the quarterback position. You can have the yards. You can have the 300 yards. You can have the 4 touchdown passes. I'll take the win and the turnover win. And he was doing that. Now, he was failing to hit the 200-yard mark. So they said, okay, we got Wilson. We paid him this money. We brought him in. We made a big splash. He's a proven winner. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see what can happen. The problem is he's undersized and too old. I mean, to be blunt, he's a future Hall of Famer, no doubt. But at this stage, I think that they would have been better served to continue to develop the other kid, and continue to win games.
Right.
But, it just seems like they kind of stunted themselves with that decision. Now they're now they got a guy who's perhaps even more shaken. I mean, this has got to take a toll on anybody's confidence. So, can they get him back mentally, back physically, and back on track to continue to improve, where they just pump the brakes and put the whole project on hold, 6 weeks in last year? That's a tough challenge, but there really aren't that many alternatives. There just aren't. I mean, the quarterback free agent market is not very strong this year. The quarterback draft stock is not very deep. So they're just going to have to make the most of the situation that they're in And I think that I'm with you on that. I think Fields deserves another shot.
I like the kid out of Ohio State. That's a pipe dream. But and the reason it being, unless they trade up or something, is that Pittsburgh and people pointed it out, and they're exactly right. They win enough not to be in the high picks in the drafts, but they don't win enough to get to the Super Bowl. So you can't get your franchise quarterback if you picking 24 all the time or 25 or something like that, because you're making the playoffs, winning 9, 10 games, but you can't get the pick that you want. So they should have done this year is let Fields play it out, and Russell be the backup. If we look like we're only gonna win 6 wins, you stay with Fields, you get a higher pick, you get him developed, he comes back next year, you pick a quarterback in the draft, and there it is. And I think Tomlin and my feelings on Tomlin's going back and forth over the years. I respect him, and I know he's a damn good coach, but sometimes he's too loyal to a fault. And you got to let old players go. You got to let some of these coaches that are not doing their job go. And you can't be stubborn. And the biggest thing I said to you the last time we talked is the problem with Tomlin and Harbaugh and even Sean McDermott and people like that is that they don't make great in-game changes. They stick with the game plan, and the game plan's not working. So now you got to get Andy Reid does it. Belichick would do it. Those guys would do it. You got to be able to adjust on the fly. And that's the biggest issue I have with Tomlin and people like him.
Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, being a head coach is not easy. I mean, they're well compensated for a reason. They're basically the head of, not quite the head, but the head of a small army. You've got 45 grown men, the best athletes in the world, some of the highest paid athletes in the world, some of the biggest egos in the world that you have to juggle. Then you've got your entire staff. You have to monitor them. Of course, you have veto power over the play calling. So that's constantly going on in your head. Then, of course, game day situations. I know you have assistants, et cetera, to help with the logistics, but you've got to get everybody from point A to point B. Oh, and then you have to get them ready to play. And then you have to go ahead and win the game. Or if you lose, face the media afterwards and explain why you lost. So, it's not for everybody, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You have to have a certain skill set and a certain personality to make it all work, plus know the game of football inside and out, and beat the other highly trained professionals on the other sideline every Sunday. So the fact that Tomlin's been able to do all of that every year for 18, 19 straight years with a winning season, I think speaks volumes about his ability as a coach. Same thing with Harbaugh and his tenure, and to a lesser degree what McDermott's been able to do in Buffalo. It's not easy to be a head coach. Some of these guys need a little bit more recognition, I think, from the fan base, a little more appreciation from some of these guys who are screaming for their heads. Because guys like that are a rare breed. They just are. Coaches come and go, every year. It's 25% turnover at the position.
Right.
So, I think the Ravens, I think the Steelers, the Chiefs, some of these teams that have been able to go, a long time with the same guy in the same position, got to be doing something right and deserve credit.
Yeah, and I'm not taking that away from them, but just look at the Steelers, the 4 under Bradshaw. The first 2 years they were a running team. The last 2 years, they were a passing team. The defense pretty much stayed the same. They were pretty rock solid. But again, just being able to adjust. I mean, the Patriots done it. Whether they had Randy Moss or Corey Dillon or so, I mean, they just knew how to adjust, not just in games, but their philosophy with the personnel that they have. And they, I think Pittsburgh and New England are the same, where they kind of get rid of guys before the time they really need to, they get rid of them before they get too old and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the old adage up here is better a year early than a year late.
Right.
And we saw that time and time again with the Patriots, with some of those veterans. A pretty good way to look at it, I don't know if this came from Belichick or not, it came from somebody, was to kind of treat the NFL roster the same way a coach would treat a college roster, in that it's typically a 5-year career, right, with football. A lot of times the freshman will redshirt, and it ends up being 5 years. And that's about the same way that the NFL contracts are aligned. About the rookie contract is what, 3 years with a club option for a fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe. And then of course you can franchise a guy twice in a row if you want. So you could hold on to some of the stars for as long as 5-6 years straight out of the gate. But typically, again, you bring them in first year, rookie, treated as a freshman year. What do they have? You evaluate them. You don't start them, but you kind of mix them in. And then by the end of the year, you can see if you can rely on them. Second year guys, they should either be starters or solid backups. Third year, you probably cut if you're not making it to that point. But third year, more of the same. You're probably a full year starter, etc. Fourth year comes along, they reevaluate. Are you worth the money, etc.? If you are, then you stick around and you sign a contract at that point, entering year 4. And then, so, if year 5 and year 6 comes around, okay, now it's time to get paid. From a player's perspective, I've been in the league. I've sacrificed for you guys. I've put in my time. I've helped you win a lot of football games, etc. Well, the ownership is going to look at how old you are. Okay, you're 29, 30 years old. How many miles, quote unquote, have you gone? How many games have you played? How many snaps? How many carries? And obviously take that into effect as well. So New England for a long time would say, okay, yes, you deserve it, but moving forward, we're going to start seeing diminishing return because you're on the wrong side of the age curve, whether that's 28, 29, or 30. So,
Yeah.
In theory, that's a player's prime. That's when they should be making in the big dollars. But New England is, okay, better a year early than a year late. Let someone else pay them, get the diminishing returns. We'll save the cap, and we'll just start the process over in the draft.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, all the especially, well, in particular with Brady's 10 Super Bowls, that you can look at and go back and, Vinatieri winning it with the field goal. I mean, just so many different ways they've gotten it done. And that's a credit to their organization. Nick, before you go, I want to talk about the Celtics real quick because I saw them play not too long against the Knicks. And it was like it was junior varsity against varsity offensively. And even on the defensive end, the Celtics were defending well, limiting offensive rebounds, getting up and down the court. And the biggest thing I seen that I didn't even see last year when they won, it's just Jason Tatum seems like he's just on another planet now. Like he just comes down, gets a shot, he gets in the lane, whatever he wants to do. It's just like he's just playing like against a high schooler or something like that, or a college kid, because his game seems so much fluid on both ends of the court. Is he playing better than last year? And is this team better than last year? Because they are long and athletic.
Yeah, it's about the same. I'd say the same for both. Tatum, he may be playing a little more confident. He's always a confident player, though. So it's hard to say that. But, if you look at the 12 months and what he's been able to accomplish, you would assume that any human being going through that process would come out the other side more confident. An NBA champion and then an Olympic champion. So he solidified his seat with some of the best the country had to offer. All eyes were on that stage. I thought he should have played a few more minutes with the Olympic team, but that's another conversation.
Right. I agree with that.
But not to get off track. The point is, he belongs. I mean, he's an NBA champion. He guided his squad all season. I know it was Brown who got the accolades in the finals, but Tatum is widely seen and has been as the leader of this team, and I think he's playing like it. Now, to his credit, in the whole Brown situation, I mean, two guys who weren't as confident. This thing may have fissured. Because the media has looked for reasons to break them up. Not necessarily this year, even the last 2 years, but prior to them winning the title, the idea, or at least the question, was floated: can they play alongside each other?
Right.
Remember that, right? That was a hot button topic. Nobody talks about that now, obviously. So my point is, These are two headstrong superstars, selfless superstars that are more concerned with the big picture and not getting caught up in the hype. And I think they're setting an example for all of us to follow. I mean, as far as the Celtics, they can turn it on and off when they want. They're that good. I said that on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
They've got it kind of on cruise control, coasting through the regular season. Not too concerned about the record, although, again, Celtics fans would like to see them wrap up home floor before the regular season ends. But that's still, to be seen. But in terms of just, take the other night with the Knicks. That was a statement game, right? I mean, how good are the Knicks? What's the scene in the Eastern Conference? It was one of the bigger games,
Right.
at least that you're going to find. And what happened? They brought their A game and they dominated.
Blew them off the floor.
Right. So this is a team that it's hard to find a weakness. As you said, they're athletic. They can run. They have guys who can create their own shots. 2 of the top 15 players in the league offensively. They have length. They can rebound. Oh, and they got shooters. Oh, and they got depth. They got a guy named Peyton Pritchard who's coming off the bench and giving them a spark with that second unit. He should be in the discussion for Sixth Man of the Year.
Yeah.
So they're deep. They're well coached. They're selfless, and they're playing with confidence. And right now, just kind of coasting through the regular season. Still with the eyes on that top spot. Still chasing Cleveland, but right now, just playing good basketball and getting everybody involved.
Yeah, and that coach, I mean, as great as he is, we see what his mentor is doing in Houston, the way they're playing. But I digress. But to your point, I just think that Boston just looks like they're in when they play like that, they're in a different class with everybody else. And what about the Knicks? What are the Knicks? I know they're waiting for Mitchell Robinson to come back and help them, but I mean they definitely can score. My concern with them is their coaching staff will play 8 players or 7 players and burn them out. But by the time the playoffs comes, guys are injured. Guys have hamstrings and all kinds of injuries. That would be the concern if I'm a Knicks fan.
Yeah, that's a legit concern as well. And I think they are deep enough, at least during the regular season, to go 9 or 10.
He just doesn't play 9 or 10, though.
Yeah. I think because they want to win games. So it's kind of a short-term versus a long-term approach. The All-Star game probably comes at the right time for the Knicks. Just take a breath, get everybody refocused, refreshed, and healthy again moving forward, and then you can kind of tamper with the rotation if need be at that point. But they're still going to be competitive. I mean, they're athletic, they can score. Can they lock down, particularly in the post? I think that's the question. We touched on it for a minute or so last week. But Karl Anthony Towns, I mean, this is his time right now. I mean, this is the peak of his powers. He's 29 years old. He's in his prime. Can he be the guy that he was at Kentucky that Minnesota hoped he would be when they drafted him? A dual threat on both ends, using that 7-foot frame to change games up front. And I'm not sure we've seen that as consistently as the Knicks need to see it moving forward. So I think a lot depends on Towns on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I think the final thought, I think that Cat is a smaller but better shooter version of Joel Embiid. I'm old school. I don't want to keep seeing big men taking threes all the time. You
Right.
might make them. I mean, Djokovic, of course, he can make them, but his is more in a flow of the game. Like he's open to take it. Embiid will come outside and try to take it. Towns will take those. I want you on the block. I need you in the post. Then you could do more stuff there. And that's always been my concern with Karl Anthony Towns. He doesn't like to stay under there and he's not consistent with what he wants to do. You want to post? You want to be a 3-point shooter? What do you want to do? He's just very inconsistent, he's saying.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. He wants to be a stretch 4 when I think he's more effective as a traditional low post threat.
Right.
And we'll see. Once Mitchell Robinson and he's another 7-footer joins him up front, we'll see. But I don't know, LA. I mean, those old Knick teams had an enforcer. These Knick teams don't.
Right.
And I know they're two different teams. This one's a little more offensive approached, but the teams that were winning, the 90s teams, those were defensive-oriented teams. As we know, with Oakley, anchoring that back line, the toughest guy in the league, a 6-foot John Starks getting up in the face of Michael Jordan. Like those teams had heart. And I'm not saying this Knick team doesn't, but they're just built differently. And I think that's that playoff DNA that succeeds is on the defensive end. And I'm not sure that they have that.
Yeah, this is not Pat Riley, Jeff Van Gundy defensive team, and they have a defensive coach. That's the crazy part about it. Like
right.
He's built his resume on defense, but they're giving up $132 to Celtics or whatever what the score was, and they've given up a lot to other teams as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do after. All the teams, the top teams, even in particular Cleveland, who's been steady all year, what happens after the All-Star break. Nick, as always, I appreciate you, my friend. Be careful. I'll talk with you soon, sir.
Sounds good, LA. Have a good weekend.
You too now. Nick Anastas, Anastas Media, covering the Patriots, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Red Sox, and everything in between from the New England area, covering sports like that. Don't forget, if you want to follow us, you can go to YouTube, LA Batchelor at YouTube, become a subscriber. You can also do that at Pad Nation. That's PAD Nation. X on Twitter. It's Pad Nation 2 on X. And, of course, LA Batchelor, YouTube, Instagram. And you can also watch us here at StreamYard. Thank you for joining us. We will talk with you very soon. And we appreciate you checking in.